It's my privilege to introduce, although Dave Langford doesn't need an introduction for most of us, but David Langford has been away for a few months in the Congo. He's a missionary to the Congo, and he's coming to share the word. It's a real joy to have him come and share the word with us. So give him a warm welcome. He's going to speak.
Thank you. I really feel privileged to be able to be with you this morning. I sort of set it up I got back last evening at at home about 9 o'clock, and it seemed like everybody here was more concerned about whether or not I could handle this or not. But, I really rested well, and I feel great. And anyway, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the last 2 months. I left here February the 1st, and now it's April, April the 2nd? Okay, so it's been a really full 2 months, and I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me that I really suffered in Africa. It was warm and it was nice, and I got African food, and I traveled on African roads, and I met a lot of friends, and I was involved in a lot of really good stuff. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. But I think that we have some pictures, right? And because my son is so gifted with electronical stuff that we were able to put it together quickly this morning. So, and these are just, I'll give some comments, but this is just sort of a pump primer. Then I'll give you a chance to ask questions, okay? And depending on the quality of your questions, it could be really interesting, okay? Anyway, this morning, at the early service, we didn't have pictures there, but we just talked, and we got carried away so much that we didn't even get to the sermon. So maybe you'll enjoy that if that happens, okay? One of my sons, he feels like the shorter the sermon, the better it is. So this might be his best sermon. This is the main street in Bunia, the town that we were in. There was 4 of us on the team and the chauffeur, the driver. And the president of the church, his name is Pastor Kokole, really a great fella. And every year that we've done this is the 4th round that we've done. He's a part of the team, and then there's a pastor from Bunia by the name of Lomago is a part of the team. And then there was one of the assistant evangelists. He joined us, and myself, and so we function as a team. And the African Mission first went into the Congo in 1912. So that's 105 years ago, right? And the churches that they planted, but it was a lot of it was Africans, planting churches. There's 1,700 congregations now in the northeastern part of the Congo, and it's an area maybe 500 miles by 200-300 miles. And usually we go to 8 different places, and this time there was some kind of miscommunication, so we didn't get in on the first 2. And they are just being completed now because you had to go by plane. But then we went, and this is one of the dirt roads, and you see that truck up there. When you get behind a truck and the roads are really dusty, it's scary, and you wonder, what are we going to run into here? And then we have to try and pass this. Anyway, you can go on. Okay, in Bunia, this was my mode of transportation. They call it moto taxi. And we went hither and yon on moto taxi. Go ahead. Usually when we come to a place, and we went to 6 different locations, we drove about 1,000 miles, and all but 50 miles were dirt roads. And a lot of, some of the major roads are contracted to the Chinese. And they've made these, it looks like just like a major highway, but it's all dirt and dusty in the dry season. But, and then there's other roads that are rough, and then there are really rough roads, a few really rough roads. But other than that, we would go to different places. On one of these roads, I don't know if it was this one, but one of them, we got behind, it was going to a place called Durba, which is the second largest gold mine in Africa. And there were, it was a whole caravan of fuel trucks, about 40 or 50 of these, fuel trucks, and we got behind the whole caravan. And so we had to pass one at a time, and finally, just before we got to Durba, we passed the first one. So this was actually a barrier. Everywhere, there's a barrier, and you have to show your papers. And anyway, these were trucks on the other side coming our way. Go ahead. And at a new place, they would invariably welcome us. The church people would come out and they would sing and they would welcome us. And normally there was a reception time before the seminar ever began. Go ahead. And sometimes there's a whole line of pastors. You see, the African mission is an interdenominational mission. It's sort of Baptistic. And none of the missionaries had pastoral collars, but that has become a part of the church tradition. So the church, which is planted by the African mission, is actually a denomination. It's called Communauté Évangélique au Centre d'Afrique. And they say, there's also churches planted by Baptists and Presbyterians and Methodists and so on. And the African church people say, we don't have a mother church. The Baptists, they can go to America and say, we're Baptists. Where's the Baptist church here? Or where's the Presbyterian church? But the people in the African church, in these, there's 1,700 congregations in this denomination. They say, we are orphans. We don't have a mother church. We go to America and say, where's the African church here? And there isn't one. And they really feel like they're orphans. Part of it is they don't have anybody to go to ask for money and help and so on. Okay. The seminar sessions, they were usually about anywhere from 100 to 250. Normally, the African church is divided into 11 different districts. That's areas, and each area has a number of different sections. There's a total of 59 church sections, and in a church section, you might have anywhere from 15 to 50 congregations. And each section, we invited 8 people, delegates, and some of them didn't quite make 8, and some made a little bit more. And 3 pastors and 3 laymen and 2 women, and then anybody from that local church was welcome. So this was one of the seminar meetings, and I would speak often with Lomago as a translator. He was one of the pastors. He had this tremendous ability to take this and make it meaningful to people, elaborate and fill out. Go ahead. And in this time, the first time, we've each time we've been talking about this, basically the same theme. It's called natural church development. And a German researcher by the name of Christian Schwarz did quite an extensive study of 1,000 churches in 30-some different countries to identify what are the universal principles for a healthy church. And he identified 8 different principles. Like one is passionate spirituality. In other words, people are passionate about their love for Christ. Another is inspirational worship. Another is loving relationships. Another is need-oriented evangelism. Another is gift-oriented ministry. Another is functional structures. Another is empowering leaders. Another has to do with holistic small groups. There's small groups and there's holistic small groups. I mean, you could have a Bible study group that focuses on Bible study, but when they get together and they pray and they're concerned about each other and they exercise their spiritual gifts to build up one another, then it's holistic, that kind of thing. So the first year was sort of a general introduction to this, and it was sort of a shock to the African system, I think. One place, when we explain, it sort of gives people a pair of glasses to look at the church, and they say, whoa, look at this. How do we measure on each of these issues? We'd have a whole hour on that, and then we'd break up, and they would discuss it and say, where are we at this? And one place, one of the guys said, wow, we felt like you came and you whipped us. That wasn't our intention, but they felt like, wow, we got a lot of work to do. The second year, we had mini seminars on 4 of the elements, the qualities. And the third year on 4 other ones. This year, we did something different. We got the impression that they were picking the low fruit, that a number of churches were doing a lot better in their worship service. They knew how to go about it and make it more worshipful and make it, just 2 hours instead of 3 hours. And, instead of having 6 choral groups, they might have 3 choral groups. And instead of having announcements for 15 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes. And they've been doing a lot better at worship. And they've also really caught on to the idea of spiritual gifts, that everybody has a spiritual gift, and you need to use people in terms of their spiritual gifts. And the more you do that, the more happy everybody is, in using their gifts, and the worship service is much better, and everything's much better. And they have been catching on to some of these basic things. But it seemed like they were applying it to the church in general rather than the local congregation. And this time, we had an inner circle. Every church we went to, there were 6 of them, we asked the pastor to bring in 15 members from their congregation. And they were in the inner circle, and the rest of the group was in the outer circle. And on the first day, Lomago and I, we walked them through the process. We first explained how to introduce, in natural church development into congregation in a way that doesn't turn them off, doesn't make them feel, no, we're not interested in that, but makes them want it. And then how to invite the congregation together and explain to them, sometimes through a whole month of sermons, or maybe through a seminar, what are the 8 essential elements to a healthy church, so that they got it in their heads. And then you ask them, where are we in our congregation? Where are we the weakest? And in this country, we do a diagnostic. We have a form, a questionnaire. And if 30 people in a congregation that are core people in a congregation fill in this questionnaire, we send it into the office in Illinois, and they get it back in a week, and we have our photograph, which is a graph, and it tells us exactly how strong we are in each of these 8 areas. Well, in Africa, that is really, we've discovered that that's impossible to do. They're not used to filling in forms, and then they have all these different languages. You'd almost have to do it orally with everybody. And the central office in Kinshasa, I don't think they've done one of these diagnostics, But we do it in Africa. We say that they're in an oral society, and so they talk about it. and together they come to a consensus as to where they are the weakest. And Lomago, he had a great idea. He put them in small groups discussing what they thought, and not all the groups came out the same, but then they had to talk about it and figure out where we're the weakest. And then they talked about, why are we weak there? They were talking about their local church there. And then what are we going to do about it? It was all, they'd have to really do it themselves in a longer period of time, but it actually gave them a model to follow. And then in the planning, we got each church section to choose 2 or 3 congregations where they're going to put this into practice. And President Kokole, he had a great example. I don't know if some of you can remember the days when there was, airplanes with engines. The great big engines. When I was a kid, I grew up in the Congo, and we came to America on great transport planes. They had 4 big engines, and he explained that the pilot he doesn't start up all the engines at once. He starts one, and it goes, and it really revs up, and then he starts the second one, and then the third one. And Kokole said, that's what we want to do. We want to start with just a few churches. You can't start all of them at once. And so that was the second day, or the first day. The second day, actually, I had planned to give as a mini seminar on the third day a talk on how to help a church that is plateaued or is in decline. In the U.S., they say that 80% of U.S. churches are either plateaued or in decline. How do you help a church become renewed, grow, come, get new life? And so, I'd worked with an organization that really specialized in that, Church Resource Ministries, for about 5 years. So, I gave them some of that, and the fellow that was translating for me was an experienced pastor, and he says, no, this has to be for everybody. So the second and the third, up to the 6th, we did for everybody the second day. And they were really fascinated. The whole idea of a target audience. I guess we're familiar with target audience. I think they hadn't even thought of that, a lot of people. They say, who are we trying to reach? Obviously everybody, but you can't reach everybody. And I told them, about our churches, that if you have a church with modern Christian music, there are certain people that won't come to it. And if you have a church with traditional church music, there are some people that won't come to it. And if you have a relaxed atmosphere with people come in jeans, then the people that want to come to church dressed up, they won't even come. You see, so you have to figure out who you're trying to reach, and then figure out how you're going to reach them. So they'd sort of opened their eyes to a lot of things, I think. But okay, we'll continue. The third day, we did have mini seminars. One was for the leaders, and then there was one on evangelism. And the guy was really good. It probably shows the difference between evangelism in this country and in Africa. But in an hour and a half or so, he explained. Maybe there was 30 or 40 or 50 in his group. And he showed them how to explain the gospel in a clear way. And then they went out in twos, and they did this. And there must have been, 150 people that were converted, that accepted Christ as a result of their efforts just, in an hour and a half after that. It was really incredible. Okay, so this was the most primitive house that I was in, that I stayed in. Me and Lomago, we stayed in that left door there. And this was my bed, and Lomago's bed was over here. And everywhere, we slept under nets. I still got lots of, mosquito bites before I got under the net. And then under a few of the nets, I still got mosquito bites. But next. And this was our outhouse. This was the most primitive outhouse, were the places that we stayed. A number of the pictures that I got, haven't come through yet, but go ahead. And there was a woman in the same compound. It was a pastor's daughter, and she was really good at training a choral group, and they were doing it in her backyard, and this was the choral group. In Africa, they love choral groups. And last Sunday, I was in a big church in Bunia, a French church, and one of the groups, there must have been 70 kids, about middle age, and they had these jests and all kinds of things. It was really powerful. Next one. This was the kitchen, cleaning up, I guess, after one of our meals. Say that again? Yeah, right. A lot of kids take care of their babies, their baby brother or sister. Some are even smaller than that. But next. There's a lot of people, that just incredible pictures. Often I'd go by and I'd say, I wish I could get that picture. But as a foreigner, you can't just sort of snap pictures. This was one of my friends took this. You see those three ladies in the back of the trunk of a car? Next one. Anyway, he got a few really good pictures. The fellow that took the pictures said that sometimes goats get stubborn, and you sort of have to just pick them up and carry them. Next one. And Mozart, one of the things that, this is a friend of mine, and he worked with me. Some of you have been in on my talks on Ephesians, studies in chapters 1 to 3 of Ephesians, and I did 6 different sermons on that. Well, I broke each one up into 2, except for the last couple, were just 1, and I would explain the passage for 15 minutes, and then with Mozart, we discussed it for a radio presentation. So I prepared 9 half-hour radio presentations in French and and 9 half-hour ones in Swahili. And Mozart is saying goodbye. Anyway, I think that might be. Oh, okay. This is the first one. Good. So this was our team, and the president is on the left, and I'm not sure. Anyway, Lumago and Pierwood, and the chauffeur is on the right. So that, we drove in this Land Rover for these 1,000 miles. Okay, so we did these 8, or it was actually 6 different seminars, and they finished. The last 2, I think they're just finishing them up right now. You had to go in a small plane because they were quite a distance. At each location, something that I did just for the first time, I asked the pastor to give me, to ask the young people of the church to come and talk with me. It was, we usually finish somewhere around 5, and between 5 and 6:30, just to dialogue with me, because I wanted to know where young people are at and how they relate to the church and so on. So we did this at 6 different locations. Usually it was about an hour and a half, but the first place was where the mine was. Each place defined young people differently. The first place, it was in their 20s. The second place, they were high school kids. The third place, there was sort of a mix and so on. But in the first place, we talked for 2 hours, and they said, could we continue tomorrow evening? And I said, yeah. And we talked for 2 more hours, and they said, could we continue tomorrow evening? Unfortunately, the third day, we went too late, and we weren't able to do it. But at each place, I would ask them, what is the level of participation? In French, they say collaboration, between the church and young people, between the church leaders and young people. And 0 is miserable relationship, and 10 is great relationship. And the first place they said, the first guy said, I think it's 2. And the second guy said, it's less than half. I think it's 1. And I thought, whoa. And the average was 3. The pastors are often from an older generation, and they have a hard time. They sort of feel like they're chiefs in their congregation, and they have to police the young people. And the young people have their choral groups, and they want to put some animation into it, like this. And the pastors, they think that is being worldly, And so there's this conflict. And, it made me realize that at the last place, each place they would say, okay, is this dialogue going somewhere? Is that going to benefit us? The young people said, we want to be discipled. We want to be trained. We want somebody to counsel us. And it doesn't seem like there's many pastors that are on their wavelength, And so we realize that we have a lot of work to do just in terms of training. Often it doesn't have to be a pastor. It can be a school teacher that's really committed. If we give them some biblical training and some training in counseling, they can do a great job. So the other thing that we have to work on in the future is how to get pastors to be, to empower leaders, to empower young people, rather than, at present, it's not just that they block them, they sort of hinder them from moving ahead. And not all churches, but there are churches that have really great youth ministries. Anyway, let me just let you ask some questions. I don't know if you have any questions. Yes?
Was it dangerous?
Yeah, it wasn't dangerous for us. But there are areas, like the area that we didn't fly to, that they flew to. The other members of the team, went afterward to these 2 other areas. And in that area, there's rebel activity. They call it the LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army is what it's called. It's almost blasphemous because they just, slaughter and kill. And they had kidnapped about 10 people from one mission area, and they had released them, but it was still like that. And in one area, you'd go for about 10 miles on this. It was the one paved area, about 50 miles of pavement. There was about 20 miles that you go, and all the houses are empty because, the rebels had come and killed people again and again and again. And it's hard to figure out exactly who they are. It appears that it's related to Uganda, but it appears that, even the government in Congo, helps create instability so that they can remain in office, that kind of thing. So it's really sick. We have the United Nations in the area, and they make deals with the rebels, so that they can keep their jobs. It's really incredible. But any other questions? Yes.
I think Lila had told me that Congo, the country, is huge. It would probably be the equivalent of like our whole northeastern part of the United States.
Yeah, it's the United States east of the Mississippi. Uh-huh.
So, the whole United States. So that's
The United States east of the Mississippi. Yeah.
And you were in the northeast part of.
Yeah. There's an area of lakes up there, and one's called Lake Albert, and the town of Bunia is about 20 miles from Lake Albert, and it's quite near the Uganda border, and part of it is near the Sudan border.
One takeaway, something that we could learn from them. I know you haven't answered them, but perhaps you've thought about it. What is one takeaway from the Congolese brothers and Christian brothers and sisters in their worship time that we could take here in our church? What's one takeaway? Something that we could learn from them?
Yeah, that is a good question. I guess what I observe about their singing is that they have two kinds of songs. You know, one song is they have a hymn book, and this hymn book was translated into Swahili or into Bangala from English by the missionaries back in the 1950s or so. So we have all these great hymns, that are translated, but hardly anybody has a hymn book. Some of them have memorized it, and they sing them without much gusto. And they feel like that's the real Christian music, okay? But then they have choruses, and somebody leads, and they have, somebody leads, and everybody joins in and leads and joins in, and they're standing, and the whole congregation is moving, and you say, whoa, they've really gotten into this. I thought of Larry. I thought, wow, I wish Larry were here to see this. And it just comes alive. And I mean, even though I grew up in Africa, I look at that and I say, whoa, I'm not at all African. I can't even get into this. I can't even understand what they're saying. But I guess it's that quality. And the church, many of the church Christians, they think that this is sort of, froth, that this isn't the real Christian music. The real Christian music is the one that the missionaries left us. But this is the one that, they get into. And it reminds me that in reading about musicology and so on in the mission field, God made many kinds of birds, and each bird has its own song. And God loves, when Christians sing out of their own cultural tradition and in their own way. God loves, that kind of worship. And I'm still trying to convince them of that this kind of music is the real Christian music. Anybody else? Yeah. I think it's more, a really short refrain that everybody, and then the leader, leads with new words. But, I want to get somebody to write these down for me next time maybe and learn a few myself. Yeah. Well, usually those are in Swahili or in Lingala. Anybody else? Yes.
What is the number one thing that we as the church in the United States could pray for our, the youth and the churches in Chicago?
Okay. I guess, for one thing, these churches that they've targeted to initiate, the natural church development process, it's just following that system has given us a common vocabulary to work on improvement. And as we've seen in the book of Ephesians, that it's not just, our salvation is not just personal, but it's the church is at the center of it. What God is doing in the world is calling out a people, and he's creating a new nation. And his design is that we not have barriers between us, but there be love and unity and righteousness and so on. And that we'd be a model before the world, and that, every local church be sort of a colony of heaven, demonstrating what, it's like living in the community, in the kingdom of God. And, we've, as we try and get churches to become healthy, I think that there's nothing quite as powerful in a community as a healthy church. And so there's probably about 100 churches that are being targeted to begin to take seriously this process to improve. The other thing is just the young people, and there's some encouraging things as well. There's one fellow who's just been assigned to be in charge of communications. The African Church has about 8 radio stations, FM radio stations all over. And this fellow has done some creative work before where he was. He can actually help young people with their local groups. He gives them input, and they listen, and then they discuss. And I think that there's a lot that we can do through the media that there's possibility for. Thanks.
It dovetails a little bit on this. I've often read and heard it said that the Christian church in China does not want us to pray for them. They pray for us.
Yeah.
Persecution drives their zeal and evangelism, and they do not see that when they look to the United States.
Yeah.
In Africa, how persecuted are these Christian churches and the people who attend them? And what is their sense and awareness? You said that a lot of them they feel like they're orphans. But what is their sense when they look to the United States of where the Christian church is?
Yeah, I'm not sure they have a great idea of the church in America. They're not experiencing a lot of persecution, but they experience a lot of hardship in life. When I talk to different ones and they talk about what they need to send their kids to school, or for different building a house or whatever, sometimes I thought they would ask me maybe for $5 or $10, but they're asking for $300, $400, $500 for different projects, and there's just really not an economy of jobs. In our country, we have an economy of jobs. In Africa, and if you go by the statistics, what the average person makes, it'd probably be $200-300 a year, but that's not very accurate, because most people live off their garden, and if you translated what they get out of their garden into money, it's much more than that. But people don't have many jobs, and yet young people are flocking to universities. In the town of Bunya, there's estimates of 500,000 or 1 million. But we have all kinds of universities, and they're getting degrees in all these different programs, and they get out, and there's no jobs. It sort of seems counterproductive. And I said to somebody, well, I think that they should just learn to be entrepreneurs, to start their own job. And then this person said, well, the government makes it so hard for you to start your own job. They slap all these, taxes on you, that it's sort of a dead-end street. People, they live. Their eyes are open. They know that they live in one of the most, the country that has. They have diamonds and gold and copper and forests, and one of the most wealthy countries in the world. And yet, if you figure out, according to the countries of the world, they're about the bottom of the pile. And our president is one of the richest people in the world. So, how do you live with that? And, his term of office was done last year, but he's still in office. How do you live with that? You think it's bad here, huh? Okay, go ahead. Yes,
I have a question. You made the statement that the churches here in America are either plateauing or they are dying.
Yeah.
When you say there in Africa, they are more motivated by this initiative of national church development than we are as a church community?
I think it depends a lot on the individual church. Initially, they weren't terribly motivated. The pastors, have the concept that the pastor is the chief. And, if you look in church history, usually, churches the structure of the church, the view of organization and leadership is shaped by the culture. The Bible says we should be led by elders, but leaves a lot of room for adjusting to cultures. So in the early church, they followed the structure of the synagogue. And then, it became more and more Roman, and they established this hierarchy of bishops and so on. And in this country, the average church is like an organization, and the pastor is the CEO. In Africa, it's the chief, and the secret is not in the style of leadership, but it's in servant leadership. So we keep saying to them, you got to be a servant chief. That kind of thing. So, but that chief mentality meant that they weren't interested in getting their congregation together and asking them and telling them what makes for a healthy church and saying, what do you think is our weakest point? The pastors felt, we went to Bible school. We know what this is. What do they know about all this? And we kept saying, but, 50 eyes can see better than 2 eyes. And if you come and you say, this is what we need and this is what we'll do, then the people will say, well, do it. But if you say, what do you think we need and what do you think we'll do, nobody asks at the end, who's going to do it? Everybody knows that's us, that we're going to do it. And so it is, it's taken several years, but I think that, that we're at the place of really breaking through in significant ways. So anyway, I really did have a sermon, but it seemed like that it's, at this point, it's more valuable just to share some of the experience in the Congo and interact with you all, and we'll get to the sermon another week, okay? Thank you.